Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, before I have three questions. Before I come forth with my questions, let me make a comment about my rather harsh introductory remarks. I had two problems. One was that when we had our conversation, I thought it was confidential. I didn't know there were other people on the line. And the second thing is the report. A conversation like that should not go directly to the media. And I don't know why it did, and you don't need to respond to why it did. But in spite of what you may have heard from me, I have one frailty which I have lived with for a long time, and that is, in spite of what you think, I love everybody. Now, here are my three questions, and I structured these, Dr. Kalm, to be yes or no questions. So it should be easy, and I ought to be able to get all of them in. So you can start the clock here. Dr. Kahl, you said that, well, let's go. Under the Soleimani's leadership, the Quds force was responsible for the murder of hundreds of American men and women in uniform. Soleimani also armed, trained, and directed funds to terrorist groups across the region, which deliberately killed many thousands of innocent people in addition to Americans. Dr. Kalm, you said that Soleimani's killing in January 2020 would lead to war. This didn't happen. How do you see it now? Is the world a better place without Soleimani? Yes or no?
I didn't shed a tear for the death of Qasem Soleimani for all the reasons that you mentioned, Senator Inhofe. I was concerned about the escalatory dynamics.
Is the world in a better
sad
position now without him?
I think it probably is a better place without him.
Thank you. You wrote that President Trump's decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem risks a third Palestinian violent uprising. And that's also, as I said in my opening statement, didn't happen, nor did the exaggerate in fact, the Israeli-Arab cooperation has never been better. Do you acknowledge that your previous assumption that a stronger U.S. Israeli relations would spark violence and harm relations with the Arab states? Were those statements a mistake? Did you agree with it now?
I think dynamics in the Middle East have changed. I support the Abraham Accords, and I wouldn't move the embassy back to Jerusalem, and that's the policy. I mean, move it away from Jerusalem, and that's President Biden's policy, which I support.
Very good. The last Thursday, the Secretary of Defense Austin's recommendation, President Biden took lethal action against Iranian-backed groups that continue to target Americans. I agreed with that action. Dr. Kahl, do you agree with do you agree and support President Biden's actions against the Iranian-backed militias, and do you believe pressure must continue to be placed on groups who take their orders from the Iranian leadership?
I do.
Good. And do you agree that so long as Iranian-backed groups continue to target Americans for murder, any easing of sanctions against Iran should be off the table?
I believe that we need to get the nuclear program in a box, because as troubling as Iran's behavior is, and it's very troubling, it would be exponentially more dangerous if Iran acquired a nuclear weapon. So there may be contexts in which nuclear-related sanctions are part of a compliance framework, but we should not be loosening sanctions on terrorism or human rights or anything else that checks back Iran's destabilizing activities.
But if they continue to target Americans for murder, would easing the sanctions against Iraq, do you think they should be off the table?
Iran was engaged in those activities before the Iran deal, during the Iran deal, and since we've reimposed sanctions after leaving the Iran deal, I think we need to check back Iran through a whole host of steps, some of which include sanctions, but there are many other things we need to be doing alongside our allies in the region to counterbalance Iran.
Okay, I'm going to ask it one more time. And we're talking about in the event that they continue doing what they have been doing, shouldn't easing sanctions be off the table? Yes or no?
We should not ease sanctions on terrorism or their other activities, and we shouldn't ease any sanctions on the nuclear front until Iran is in complete compliance with its obligations under the JCPOA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.